All right, awesome. Good evening, everyone. Great to see so many new and familiar faces out today. For my talk, I'm going to be doing an introduction to Experience APIs, also known as XAPIs or Customer Experience APIs. We'll start off doing a brief intro of APIs and some other key concepts, and then dive into how Experience APIs can be a great tool to guide and empower user journeys. Now, this is actually my first ever public talk after 2.5 years of working remotely. I've read recently that your brain releases similar chemicals when you're excited as when you're nervous, and you can actually shift your mindset to excitement when you're feeling the nerves kicking in. So safe to say, I am very, very excited to stand in front of all of you fine folks and cover this topic with you all. All right, so we're going to start off with an intro to your presenter, me. My name is Laura Tannahill. I am a software developer at TELUS Digital. I actually don't have a typical computer science background. My education is in chemistry and marketing. I have a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Dalhousie University here in Halifax and a graduate diploma from Fanshawe College in London, Ontario. I did spend a little under a decade working in hospitality as a server bartender and also dabbled in television. I spent an entire summer in tattoo shops filming a documentary series on tattoo artists before moving into the world of dev. Now, over the pandemic, I did make the decision to reskill. I enrolled in a coding bootcamp in late 2020, where I coded for about 10 to 12 hours a day for a solid 3 months. I was fortunate to find a dev role at a startup right out of boot camp and ended up landing at TELUS a little bit over 2 years ago. I did spend the first chunk of my career working mostly as a front-end developer, but I've spent the last 1.5 years working on a back-end team, building out APIs that power the mobility commerce experience on TELUS.com, serving millions of users every month. Other than that, I'm also a volunteer, as many of you know, here at Halihax. I'm a coding coach over at Get Coding. As Alex mentioned, he was my very first student. I am really passionate about fostering growth here in the Halifax tech community, and I encourage everyone to come out here and challenge yourself, like I'm doing right now. As you can see on the screen, most of my time away from the computer is spent accompanying my little guy, Mikey, on his squirrel chasing adventures. Here we are. All right. I know most of us in the room are familiar with the concept of APIs, but I'd like to start off with a brief refresher, as I mean this is a front-end event after all. Now, API stands for Application Programming Interface. APIs serve as a bridge between software systems, enabling them to communicate and interact. By defining a set of roles and protocols, APIs allow developers to access and utilize functionalities or data from one application to another. This really facilitates the integration of diverse services, applications, and platforms, enabling the development of more robust and interconnected software ecosystems. Now, throughout this deck, you'll notice a few space and food analogies. Here's the first one. Thank you, AI-generated art. So, at its basics, you can kind of picture APIs as a server in a restaurant. They take your order, pass it along to the kitchen, and then deliver it to you when it's ready. APIs are really powerful, and if you can think of it, there's probably an API for it. APIs can be private, internal, which require a developer key to access, or public APIs are available as well. So, keeping in our space theme, some of my favorite beginner-friendly public APIs are RoboHash, where you can generate unique robot or alien pictures using any text, and the ISS API, where you can actually get real-time coordinates of the current location of the International Space Station. So if you're looking to dabble into some API work in your next project, these are a couple great beginner-friendly APIs to get started off with. Now, before we move on, you may be thinking, why are we talking about APIs, Laura? This is a front-end event. Now, APIs are actually a really important piece of the puzzle for most applications, and UI and API have a lot of the same concerns, providing fast, efficient, and enjoyable experiences for our users, and enabling personalization and dynamic data. Both small and enterprise applications will often use a CMS or a content management system like Contentful to provide UI content and images, which are fetched via the CMS API. Understanding APIs and their many applications is a great tool in a front-end developer's tool belt. So there are a couple other key terms that I'd like to cover before we move on here. So the first is BFF, yes, short for best friends forever, but also for backend for front end. Now BFF is a concept in web development where a dedicated backend is designed to specifically cater to the needs of a particular front-end application in a one-to-one relationship. In simpler terms, it means having a backend server that is customized to support the requirements of a particular user interface or front end. So this approach allows for better optimization and flexibility in managing data and functionalities, providing efficient and tailored interaction between the front end and the server. Another important note is that often it will actually be the front-end teams that maintain this BFF layer. The flow will typically look like this, as we see on the screen. So a UI makes a request to its BFF. The BFF may transform the data and make it into something that the upstream service providers can consume. The BFF will then get the response, may transform it again before sending it back to the front end. We will see a little bit of a more detailed visualization of this in a future slide. Now, the next concept I want to cover quickly is the concept of a domain. So a domain refers to the subject area of a software system, often correlated to a business capability. An example here would be, say, the order and cart domain. Now, the big question, what is an Experience API? Borrowing the definition from Haney Elamari, an Experience API is a service boundary around customer journeys as an extension to business capabilities. With this approach, we model customer workflows into reusable channel-agnostic APIs. So with the next few examples we'll go into, we're going to be sticking with our food theme and use the example of a food ordering app. So this particular app has many restaurants available for a customer to order from. For this example, the app is available on web, on a mobile-only app, and a tablet-only app. We can see here that each app or channel, web, mobile, and tablet, have its own dedicated BFF, and each have to make similar calls to the domain APIs or service providers, these menu, restaurant, and offer APIs, to fetch the data that they need to enable the customer to browse food options available. Now you can see how this web can become tangled very quickly. There's likely a lot of duplication in code and functionality across these BFFs, and as they're serving the same user needs. If a contract change is made by any of the domain APIs, that will require a code change on all three BFFs. Another risk with an architecture like this is there may not be parity across platforms. There could be inconsistencies with how the individual BFFs are transforming the data returned from the domain APIs. So for example, perhaps web is using one version of the menu API, and app is using a different version of the API, which could lead to an inconsistent experience. Now, this leads to the question, could there be another way? So finally, enter an Experience API. So you can see that weaving web has disappeared on the image to the right, and all the BFFs are now calling the domain APIs via an Experience API layer, in this case, the Browse API. Now, what is this doing? The Experience API is extracting the complexity of the individual BFFs and serving as a single source of truth. Now, the BFFs no longer have to handle the orchestration of making calls to each domain API, and can instead handle the specific channel needs. This can extract a lot of complexity, something as simple as parity in what menu description is displayed on each channel, to extracting the handling of retry logic for failed calls, and ensuring consistent handling of edge cases. Another benefit, if any of the domains have a contract change, these menu, restaurant, and offers APIs in this example, code only needs to be updated in one place, on the Experience API layer. The Experience API will then have its own contract with its consumers, which should remain unchanged. So we can really see how powerful this can be, as often in this scenario, the domain APIs, BFFs, and front end could all be managed by separate teams. In the diagram to the left, if menu team makes a contract change, then all of the BFF teams are impacted, mobile, web, and tablet. Each team is going to have to take the time to not only do the work, but also prioritize the work for this change. As any of us who work on dev teams know, that is not a short process. So there are definitely some really cool benefits to XAPI architecture. Now, we've chatted about the benefit to channels and development teams, but what about the users? What are some benefits to them? We'll review some in the next few slides. So we did touch on this first one briefly, just providing our users with a seamless cross-platform experience, one of the huge benefits of an Experience API. Just as you want your UIs to offer a consistent experience across platforms, your data should do the same. Next is personalization. I really think this is the coolest capability and potential benefit of using an Experience API, and I mean the name reflects it, right? Experience API, Customer Experience API. It puts the needs of the customer at the forefront, and it provides a standardized and flexible way to track user experiences across various platforms and devices. So this allows us to get like a holistic understanding of our customers' behavior, preferences, and engagement. And then we can cater our services to align with their unique needs and expectations, and perhaps even enable us to predict their next steps. Now, this next one, I know that we have touched on it before, but I made it its own slide as I think it's important and is a huge benefit of Experience APIs. Not only minimizing duplication in code, but minimizing that duplication of effort by dev teams, of product managers, of QA, and prioritizing this work and get it done, and then plus that added bonus of our users having a very consistent and predictable experience across channels. So I've told you a lot of really great stuff about XAPIs, but what about some challenges? So the first to consider is latency. At the end of the day, we are adding another call and another layer with perhaps some complex data transformation involved. Second, of course, is the cost. Especially if the existing architecture is already in place, adoption of an XAPI architecture is going to take time and dev effort, as well as planning. Another challenge is really the design of the Experience API itself. Designing a contract that suits all consumer needs across channels can be very complex, especially as these examples are very rarely as simple as what we saw here of 3 apps on different channels that are kind of serving the same customer need. So it certainly can be a design challenge with these Experience APIs. All right, we have made it to the conclusion. So today we've covered an intro to APIs, BFFs, XAPIs, and how they empower user journeys. I hope you have some more acronyms in your pockets and perhaps even learn something that may be useful in a future project. So that is all I have for you folks today. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'll open up the floor to any questions.